Hi, welcome to 360 Degrees, and I'm going to continue my story. So, the last time that we left off, I had told you a lot about New Mexico and how I had discovered the Austrian economists in DC and wanted to move, or to Northern Virginia to be more precise, and wanted to move there and work at Heritage in DC, and that I did eventually succeed. Now, I want to back up for a second and talk about again about New Mexico just for a moment because it's important. Because when I was in New Mexico, well, I first went out there because of 9/11 in a sense. 9/11 turned my world upside down. And so I kind of got into those country songs that were so patriotic. I really was torn apart by 9/11, having seen my own neighborhood and the icon of New York that I knew as the World Trade Center, that I saw as such an epitome, an icon, just crumbled and destroyed. And like many New Yorkers, I thought of that as the main thing of 9/11, but I also knew they were hitting other places and that could take down my whole country. So anyway, the those country songs and being out in, this sort of very kind of wild libertarian land, and then Fox News. And I gotta say, I did watch Fox News during the Iraq War era, and I did like certain shows, including Tucker Carlson, who at the time didn't seem nearly as much of a white supremacist as I have realized he is in more recent years. And he seemed at the time to be this kind of more libertarian guy. And I kind of fell for that. And so it's a little embarrassing now, especially these last recent years, seeing what's happened to him. But I actually quite liked him at the time. And anyway, I just wanted to sort of mention that because when I went to DC, it was mostly for the Austrian economists and economics, and that hopeful future for myself. But it was, I had very different thinking about all of this, and kind of, I would say now it seems a bit innocent and even naive. So anyway, so I moved to DC, knowing I could get a job as a programmer, to hold me over until I could potentially get this job at Heritage, which I still didn't know if I could get it. They had not contacted me. But I moved there anyway. I wanted to go to George Mason. So I lived in Northern Virginia. I worked just down the street from my house, and I was even able to work from home. So I had a lot of freedom. And I went to some classes at George Mason. Um, and I met all of those professors that I had met online. And considered trying to get into the graduate program there. And I did chat with a lot of them, take a couple graduate courses, start writing articles for journals, all while working as a programmer. And then one day, out of the blue, about a year after I had applied, or a year after I had moved, a year after I had applied, maybe 9 months after I had moved to the area, and there it was. They were offering me a job. But then when I read the sort of fine print, it said that I was going to get paid what would have been like a quarter, like an intern salary, like a quarter of what I was getting made as a programmer. And so I was like, I already have an apartment. There's no way I could live on that. So I wrote back to them and I said, I'm so sorry, but I desperately want this job, but I just cannot live on that salary. I've been making much more recently, as a programmer, and I just can't live on that given my expenses. And they wrote back and offered me more than I was making as a programmer. So I took it. And so that was like quite an amazing moment. And I had all my friends, and I'd been going to conferences and, engaging in all the academic things as well. And I had academic friends and all of this. But I was just blown away by this opportunity to work at Heritage, I have to say. And at the time, even in the DC area, I was also still watching some Fox News. I was also watching C-SPAN and CNN and Fox Business and CNBC and all of that stuff as well. And I was just like over the moon. Even though I wanted to do academic things, I wanted policy. I wanted to have an impact in the world, and I thought I could do my agent-based model and other things, and continue with my education, and I could have an important impact in the world, not just a theoretical one. And I could continue with writing my papers and write another book. And I was still finishing my book. I was still writing my book, actually. Come to think of it, I was only getting started on writing my book in a way at this time. I had only been doing research out in New Mexico when it was in DC that I was really getting started with writing the book. Anyway, so I got the job, and I had to dress up, which I wasn't used to because I was used to being a programmer. And I went into Heritage, and I was I got to say, a little blown away by how much money was in this think tank, and how ideologically in agreement everyone was on my floor. But also, more than that, is I kind of expected that, but more than that, it was just the suits and the attitude of everyone there. It was very conservative, which, shouldn't have been much of a surprise. And I did get along with the people in the Center for Data Analysis. And, we would have laughs about stuff like, the guys on the sixth floor, which was, because the sixth floor was the family values floor. And as free market economists, we didn't agree with all of that, family values, like Christian-y kind of social conservative stuff. So we definitely had a laugh, and mostly I got along fine with them. But I could see that, people in the elevator, people in the lobby, people in the talks, well, the people in the talks were all right. They felt kind of academic a bit. But the meetings, there were good things about it, and there were strange things about it, and I was not used to seeing these kind of old gray men in gray suits. And so it was a little bit of a strange feeling for me coming from the world of programming. But I loved the work, and I did a lot of amazing things there. I worked with a macroeconomist with a macroeconomic model that I didn't really buy into, but because I didn't really buy into the sort of mainstream macro models. But it was great to work with her, and I got to write my piece using the individual income tax model, which is not a dynamic model. So it was just crunching numbers, really, and extrapolating out over the years. But that kind of extrapolation is more statistical and not really a model that's based on economic theories, whether they're Keynesian or any other type of theory. So anyway, and I did, the guy who hired me, the head of the Center for Data Analysis at the time, was blown away by my agent-based model, and loved that. And we did have a chance to work on it a little bit while I was there. I actually got that macroeconomic modeler to help me in sort of like displaying the logic in sort of mathematical notation for my model. So I have a version of that paper, which has actually never been published, but has like very nice mathematical notation to describe how it works. The reason it's not really been published is I started to have less faith in it over time, because even though I made fun of the other economic models used in mainstream economics, I have sort of since realized the limitations of my own agent-based model, which are, a lot of it is sort of cultural, is you can't rely just on the simple things of supply and demand if you're going to model an entire labor force and, consumers and their purchasing habits. You just can't. Even if you try to add the complexity, if you don't have other social dynamics and cultural things and other things involved, you're really limited to what amounts to little more than just a kind of a static model, I think, because there's just too much else in play. I mean, I still think it's a kind of a great model, but it's so limited, and so it could be, like many other models, misleading. And so anyway, that's a whole nother video. But yeah, so let's see. So I tried to find friends. I did make some friends there, and I tried to find friends who were interested in going out to some of the DC events and teaching me about what goes on there. But even though I might have found colleagues who were interested in that. The friends I made, and this is kind of important, the friends I made weren't interested in that. And that's because I didn't have that kind of social connection with the people that were interested in the same work that I was interested in, and in sort of schmoozing in the same places and meeting senators and stuff. I did have contact with some senators because they wanted Heritage to do some papers, and there's a very fine line where you're not allowed to connect with between representatives and think tanks, but there was a way that they could request it as long as it was published publicly. And so I had some contact with also because they would present a tax proposal and then I would model it. And that is legit. But yeah, so there are some interesting ethical questions around some of the things that I saw at Heritage, but it got much worse after I left. Heritage Action didn't even really exist until the latter time that I was there. And then I started working from home in London. I moved to London, which I can explain in the next section because this is already getting quite long. But yeah, anyway, I did make it out to a few parties. I did meet Tucker Carlson, shook his hand, but he kind of sneered at me. He wasn't very friendly, and I never got to chat with him. And looking back, I can understand why, because I don't think he's such a great guy. In fact, he's really a disgusting guy, I have come to realize. But yeah, so that's sums up some of my experience in Heritage at Heritage and in DC, and I could probably go on for a lot longer, but I'm going to wrap this up.